For those of people who don't know me, I've been marketing and selling stuff online since I was a teenager. I can't share the specifics of all of the companies, but only 1 in 6,000 businesses reach the 9-figure mark. I've had the privilege to either work, help, or advise a dozen of them.
You were referred to Alex Hormozi, Leila Hormozi, acquisition.com by somebody that you're close with. And I would love to know, what's the process for figuring out what that one sentence is that's going to make the sale?
I'll give you an answer that kind of story driven, a really cool marketing case study, and it's between Viagra and Cialis. So Viagra was the first to market, and a lot of them marketing is red stilettos and sex. It's very loud and in your face. When the patent ran out on Viagra, in terms of the underlying chemical structure of it, you started having new entrants in the marketplace, one of which was Cialis. And they spent 6 months doing customer research on what did the market actually want. And what they found is amongst the main customer segment that actually buying this stuff, it was married couples, and the man was often buying Viagra because they wanted to improve intimacy in a relationship. And so what Cialis did is they took that and they created an entirely different marketing campaign. And there was actually a point where Cialis beat Viagra in terms of sales. And so when it comes to finding the bullseye, people have a reason for doing something that sounds good, but they also have a real reason. If you can undercover that real reason, that's what I call the bullseye. You put that front and center in a marketing campaign, and it often does well.
You're working till 2 a.m. on campaigns. Where do you find the time to go into all these cross-industry concepts and bring them into the work that you're doing? Like, how do you keep leveling up like this?
Good question. If you read the right stuff, one idea pay for the entire book like tenfold. And also podcasts. I actually think podcasts is like a last frontier of really good information on the internet. Like where you've got experts like yourself, I'm increasingly like bullish on podcasts as a method of skill acquisition and actually finding the true experts.
So if I were to go and improve at marketing, how do you go about doing it?
If someone's in the weeds doing the thing, they are building a deeper skill set than you are, like period. I actually don't care who you are. For the first email list I was given, I generated 250,000 out of it in the first 30 days. I was being underpaid, but I was playing a different game. I was being paid 300, 400 pounds a month, 50 plus ad scripts on a weekly basis. You asked about how I also learned as much as I did. I've just done an insane amount of reps. It didn't matter how much I was being paid at the time. I was aiming to be the best person within the company.
Well, today I'm here with a special guest, Tobias Allen. Thanks so much for joining us, man. You've done like pretty much everything in the like online marketing place, from like financial to e-com copy to working with personal brands. It's really great to have you here and ask you these questions. I'm excited.
Thank you, Matthew. It's a pleasure to be here. Super glad to hopefully provide value to your audience and essentially anyone who wants to sell anything online.
Yeah, you were telling me just before we started this conversation that you've helped one of your clients to get a book to be a bestseller in a country that doesn't even speak English. So I was just like, okay, well, at this point, you're selling everything, literally, even in non-English marketplaces. Like, it's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually something I learned when I was doing e-com. So one of the earliest things that I was doing was I was basically the head copywriter for an e-com agency. And I was told on how to write copy and also like create systems that was able to then be translated into half a dozen languages. So at that time, I was writing email copy that then it was all in a Google Doc. And then next to the copy that I would write would be different columns for all of the other languages that it would be translated into. So for this brand, as an example, let's just say it was a towel brand. I would write copy on how to sell a towel. And then translators would come in and translate that copy into like Finnish, Norwegian, Spanish, German. And so you essentially got training on like, how do you write copy that can actually get translated? And like, in terms of like a Hemingway saying, which is like, write the truest sentence. When you're writing copy that gets translated, you can't be flowery with your language. You have to be very direct to make sure that things don't get lost in translation. It's quite fun.
I think the biggest thing that, I think a lot of marketers and copywriters and even business owners, they struggle with is figuring out what's that like one message. Since we're talking about copy, it's like, what is that message that is simple enough, is compelling enough, but is the actual core desire of that target market, that we can use that as the piece that sells it? Because all the copy goes back to that core marketing message, that sales message, right? How do you do that? Like, what's the process for figuring out what that one sentence is that's going to make the sale?
Yeah. So I'll give you an answer that's kind of story driven. So a really cool marketing case study is between it's in the ED market, so erectile dysfunction, and it's between Viagra and Cialis. So
Okay.
Viagra was the first to market, and a lot of their marketing, as you've probably seen, was like the little blue pill, and the marketing is like red stilettos and sex. It's very loud and kind of in your face. When the patent ran out on Viagra, in terms of the underlying like chemical structure of it, you started having new entrants in the marketplace. One of which was Cialis. And what Cialis did is they spent 6 months doing customer research on what did the market actually want and who was the person actually influencing the buying decision. And what they found is amongst couples, who was the main customer segment that actually buying this stuff, was it was married couples, and the man was often buying Viagra because of their partner, and they wanted to improve like intimacy in a relationship. And so what Cialis did is they took that and they created an entirely different marketing campaign. And there was actually a point where Cialis beat Viagra in terms of sales. They basically beat the incumbent. And so when it comes to, and I call that finding the bullseye, which is finding the core desire that the market actually wants. In terms of the process to do that, it's customer research, and this isn't just like reading Amazon reviews. It's also going out and speaking to your customers. So in previous interviews, I've actually talked about like going on the street and talking to people, or within your friends and family network, who is the avatar of the person, like what is the avatar of this thing that you're trying to sell? Go and speak to
Mm-hmm.
them, and you can start to pick up within the nuances of conversation, like people have a reason for doing something that sounds good, but they also have a real reason. If you can undercover that real reason, that's what I call the bullseye, then you put that front and center in a marketing campaign, and it often does well.
Mm.
And you can do that
Okay.
anecdotally,
Mm.
but you can also do that through the data. So split testing subject lines or split testing ad angles. The data can also tell you what is the hot buttons, and then you can start to just take the same underlying message and just figure out a way to say it 10,000 times in like different ways.
That makes sense. Interesting. So really, it's not a creative process where you sit there guessing. Like, this is a kind of like a rhetorical question, but it's like basically you don't sit there and you guess what sounds the best. That real reason is already there. You're just discovering what's already there.
I would say so.
Mm.
I've had a couple of conversations in the last week where I've genuinely said, like, when it comes to writing an ad, I actually find the process quite painful, because the amount of research that I have to go in and do to, in my mind, like knock it out of the park and do something completely extraordinary is, I believe it requires an extraordinary level of effort. And so
Mm.
right now I'm looking at helping launch a new book in March on a global stage. Like, I know this book is going to be translated in 37 different languages. And I know that the core advertising message that I create now, provided it is good, will be able to be translated and then also have more kind of like legs to it. And so when it comes to like the research required to pull that off, at least in my mind, I'm not using ChatGPT. I'm carrying a physical copy of the book around, tearing up the pages, underlining the words, watching every interview that this founder has done in the past, who they've spoken to, like categorizing all of the stories that they've told, how that relate. Like, it's a painful process. I don't
Mm.
do it all the time, transparently, but like when it matters, when it comes to a big launch that could change a business, that will be when I'll start to kind of get my underlying structure out and just follow a process on how to do that.
Do you find that clients that you work with, when it comes to this level of depth and this level of, you know, research and going through the process, do they respect this process naturally, or do you have to kind of educate them and set the expectation that, like, I'm going to be doing this for 3-4 weeks before I even write a single word?
Yeah, they don't. Even at the
Mm.
top levels, it's always been a fight in order to do that. And I'll be the first to admit that sometimes you have to cut corners because of
Mm-hmm.
the demands of the business. Um, this is quite often why I'm sometimes find myself working till like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's because I will do a normal work day and I will do the demands of whatever the business needs. But then after Slack has died down, after the messages have stopped, the Zoom calls have finished, I will be by my desk doing this kind of work to make sure a campaign is successful. And so where I haven't been successful in selling the idea of like I need this time to prepare, I'll just make the time and I'll burn the midnight oil in order to do what is required.
I think that's quite admirable. I think many marketers and copywriters, they don't mind cutting the corners because they're getting paid very, very premium rates. And, you know, a 7 out of 10 campaign with a good brand still is going to get significant amount of sales. It's not necessarily going to explode, but many businesses don't like that. They've never experienced that explosive growth. So this is actually quite an acceptable campaign for them, right? But it's obviously not taking them to that next level. So that's, you know, do you find ways to generate additional revenue for yourself as a business owner by, like, you know, getting that explosive campaign? Like, do you negotiate percentages with some clients, or like, how do you use that? You're working so late for people. Is it just because you take the work seriously, or is there a way that you've been able to get yourself some upside for the fact that you're working so late?
Yeah, great question. Historically, it's just been out of, I think, personal responsibility. So if a client has trusted me enough to work together, I want to make sure I deliver. And so that's historically been a huge part of it. I will say the projects that I've started to do now, I don't take things on unless there is an element of upside or it's a mission that I believe in. And the reality is you can't stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning for 5 clients at the same time. So I'm also very selective with who I work with, and I work with fewer people to have higher impact. And that's just an approach that I personally take. So it's not something I recommend for everyone, but it's just something that I want to do. Is I want to do bigger campaigns, not more of them. And so I like kind of going deep within a single business and having far more impact than trying to do half a dozen kind of companies at the same time. And that's just a learning that I've personally found, because for this kind of work, if I can easily sign 5 clients, like, or more, but I just find that I create like 5 different jobs for myself, and I then have to like bring in team members and like either use systems, team, or like info as leverage, and that's just a personal decision for me.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's take this a little more tactical, because I know a lot of people watching this are going to think, okay, cool. So, you know, you have done a few things that very few people have the, you know, they're not willing to go that far, especially until they feel like the deal is big enough for them. But that's almost like a catch-22. It's like you kind of need to do it first, right? But now that you've done it and you've worked with, I mean, maybe you could just tell a few people here, like, what have you accomplished over the last few years as a marketer that's allowed you to work with these amazing businesses?
Yeah. So I guess for those people who don't know me, I've been marketing and selling stuff online since I was a teenager. I've helped build multiple lean marketing teams. I can't share the specifics of all of the companies, but essentially only 1 in 6,000 businesses kind of reach the 9-figure mark. I've had the privilege to either work, help, or advise a dozen of them, all ranging from like events to brick and mortar, software, D2C, and then in this instance, publishing. So like books and kind of the info space, and also mortgages as well. So yeah, a lot of impact, and somewhere in the region of hundreds of thousands of customers at this point in time. Actually, sorry, with books, millions of customers. So yeah, and this is across a global market. So everywhere from Latin America, North America, Europe, Australia, and I haven't really done much in Africa yet. So maybe that's somewhere I'd like to explore in the future.
Cool. I asked that to give that context, because what I want to know now is, if you were to, let's say, create a system or give step by step the process to go from not knowing anything in an industry that you're about to start selling something in to having a level of proficiency where, you know, I kind of know what I need to do to sell this thing. What does that process look like? I know we talk about customer research. What's the full process? look like for you?
Yeah, so I kind of have two frameworks. One is on the copywriting side, so getting clear on that messaging, and then the next one is the distribution of that message. And so when it comes to the distribution of that message, I use something called a domino strategy, which I can explain what that is in a minute. On the copywriting, it is just a formulaic approach on how you can go into any market and just follow like an A to B process of steps to understand the customer, understand the product, understand like a sales argument that you think will work within that market. And then you write the sales argument, and then you can start to test it based on data and being punched in the face. So when it comes to understanding the customer, you want to understand demographics. So these are the things that you can see. So male, female, age, things of that nature. But more importantly, you then want to understand the psychographics, what is going on in someone's mind. And this is desires, obstacles or objections, what a market believes about something. You want to understand who they want to be, so identity. And you just basically want to enter, there's a famous copywriting saying, enter the conversation and already in the mind. I really like the frame of great copy isn't written, it's assembled. And so it's essentially like capturing the tone of voice of an audience or a niche, or if you're going really broad, a story. What is that packaging that will speak to that avatar? So that's on the customer research level. And as we spoke about earlier, you do that by talking to people in real life, and you do that by seeing the data in real time. And then you can also do that by studying previous marketing campaigns. That's on the customer research. You then look at the product. When it comes to the product, let's say it's a book, you want to read the book, and you want to, again, formulate who does this appeal to, like the specifics of the book. So it's 140 pages. This is like what it covers. And then you want to translate that into benefits and selling points. So a benefit is what is the end outcome that a user gets. So this book will make you feel more confident. Like the outcome is confidence. And then you can then start to like go into like, what does confidence mean? All of those side of things. A selling point is typically inherent to the item. And so let's say the item is 140 pages. How is that a selling point? It's short enough that you can read it in an afternoon. And so you then have the foundational product. You then have selling points, which like help sell the thing. And then you have the end outcome or the transformation that the thing gives. And I would start to list those out and categorize those things. So understanding the audience, understanding the product. And then when it comes to a sales message, this is where copywriting can become very formulaic. And you can just use a underlying formula to just fit everything you've just done and fit it in a nice structure or like delivery mechanism to then distribute online. And when I mean that, like structure, let's say it's a sales message or a sales letter, or a landing page is what people would call it. Landing pages have a formulaic process on how they can be structured. So an offer, social proof, like testimonials, reviews. You've then got the story of the item. You've then got the benefits or the mechanism that makes it work. And then you've then got reviews and bonuses, guarantees, all of that. That sales message is the thing you then distribute through paid ads, through influencers, through email, through affiliates and partners. You put a lot of work creating a message that has a high degree of converting someone. And then the name of the game is then distributing that in the market. And a great thing is you can take pieces of this sales argument and distribute it in short form. And if someone comes from the short form back to your landing page, there's a congruence there. Like if on the landing page you're selling something to dog owners and you're talking about like Labradors, in your short form content, if you're talking about Labradors, there's a high degree of like congruence there. Like it's A to A. Versus if you were talking about cats in your short form, and there's no cat on the landing page, there's kind of like a break in like a golden thread that you can put through an entire marketing campaign. And then the final thing is just data, which is You've got a sales message you're putting out into the marketplace. This is where you see data to see what the best landing, the headline is, or the best lead is, the best opening, um, and essentially how can you keep it fresh. That's on the copywriting like structure side,
Right.
and you can learn that in a copywriting book. So
Yeah.
find a good copywriting book and go deep on it.
I love that. That's really good. Before we go into the distribution side of it, because I know that you've got a lot of experience there, what do you think most of these online businesses that marketers work with, where do you think that process breaks most of the time for them? And like with the let's say 8-figure guys and like maybe as a 9-figure guys, do they have a different problem? You know, like where does it break for each of those different sizes of business?
Yeah. With the smaller businesses, I would say it's distribution. So this was something I learned very early on, is I developed a pretty strong skill set with copy quite early. And I remember working with one of the local businesses in my local area, because I used to go knock on doors with the direct mail that came through my letterbox and be like, I could write this better. So I'd go and take that and then go and knock on that person's door and be like, forgive the language, this is how this is crap, you know? Like, you can do this, you can do that, and I offer to rewrite it. That has a value to a certain business, but quite often the reason a business is sending direct mail out is because they want customers, and potentially they don't know any other better way of doing so. And so what I found is I could then write them a really good like new leaflet, but then they then struggle with the distribution of it. And so for a lot of small businesses, they're not doing enough distribution. They need their expectations reset of what sometimes is required on a global stage to get the attention of people. So smaller businesses, I would say distribution. For larger businesses, let's say who have lots of distribution, the irony is it's often on the conversion side. And
makes sense.
It's conversions on the sales message that they can get out in the marketplace, but then it's also efficiencies within their scale of like making an ad more efficient has huge cost savings as also, and like it also has efficiencies throughout like a whole sales process. Like if the leads coming in close at a higher rate, then the sales team becomes more efficient. And so it's kind of this weird thing of like, if you're small, focus on distribution. If you're big, I would actually be doubling down on the message, because distribution at that stage is far, far easier. You've already got the assets. You've potentially already got 4 million people on your email list. Like, you don't want to send an AI email that burns all that trust. You want to create a really tight message on like how you can launch like how you can sell to that list and maintain that relationship while also still making sales. That's how I view it personally.
So when it comes to those bigger businesses, then it's a lot to do with how do you treat the people that you've already worked so hard to bring into your ecosystem and not burn that trust because you spend all that time building it up.
I would say so. And then also incremental revenue. Like if everyone already knows you, let's say you're like a global brand, it's less about selling you like new users, although that's still important. It's also about reminding them about why they should come back. And again, there's nuances there. Like, is how big are we talking? But
sure.
A big business still needs to bring new users in. It's just a question of like the strategy then changes because you have to take stuff off the table that would work for a really small business, but it's pointless doing for a large business. So like Facebook group funnels as an example, like for a business doing 100 million a year, advising them to do a Facebook group funnel is probably not going to move the needle for them. Yes, you could get millions of dollars a year from a Facebook group, but for a business doing 100 million, like that's 1 to 2% of the revenue. It's not exactly like a compelling idea. For a company like that, that's where you have to start maybe looking at like international expansion or new products that you can launch or new front ends. Like what is the big swings that you can take, and then you just have to keep that kind of in your mind.
I always find with the bigger, especially with online marketing, the bigger businesses, they all have a lot more skill with marketing, even though they're the CEO. It's almost like that's their main They were either previously in sales or marketing. That seems to be it. Somewhere along the line, they know marketing almost as well as the marketing team, if not better than the marketing team. Whereas a lot of the guys that get stuck at 8 figures, they had something work. They're good at building a product, but they're not marketing. They're not savvy marketers. So they kind of delegated the marketing department to an agency or to somebody in the team, and it still scales, but they can't make those bigger long-term moves. What's been your experience like?
Admittedly, I've seen that too. So
Mm,
quite often, marketing is, particularly for a founder that's marketing focused, it's one of the last things that they delegate, and they always still keep an eye on it. Um, Historically, when I've been looking at working alongside a business to help them grow, sometimes the growth actually comes from putting the founder back in the marketing seat and
mm,
like having to restructure the team or create a team that can support the founder better so that they can step back into their superpower that scaled the business in the first place. The caveat to that is, I would say, software. Really strong product led software companies have more exceptions to that rule because the software can scale. And
mm.
um, having a really, really, really dialed in product, I've seen work really well kind of in the software space. And I think I would say like uh, a popular one right now would be like Lovable in Europe. Anton is a very strong product founder, and I mean, he's great at marketing, to be clear. Like he's got an incredible personal brand on LinkedIn and Twitter or X, which has helped with distribution. The product is just so incredible, though. Like I think when they first launched it, like people were just completely blown away with how good it is. So, and then you then have viral word of mouth, which does more than any marketing campaign could ever do. So, um, I would say there's
That's a good word. Viral word of mouth. I like that.
yeah, it's actually I keep a like a slide of like leverage points within a marketing campaign, like everything from AOV to automations to ads, the script. And one of the things that I've got listed on that document is word of mouth. Because if you can bake word of mouth into a product, that's when you can also like have an exponential like viral distribution effect, particularly when it comes online. Like um on the distribution side, I talked about the domino strategy earlier. Probably makes sense to go into that now and like how it
Yeah,
works
let's do
is
that. Mm,
so the domino strategy is imagine you've got a small domino. Um, a small domino can knock over another domino that's about 1.5x larger than the next, and then so on and so forth. And so, if you've ever seen um, an example of that on YouTube, you've got someone who like pokes something with their finger, and then like further down the line, you've got this house that then tumbles over, and that's a really good kind of visualization of what geometric growth looks like. And you can see geometric growth uh, in that, but also in other areas in nature. And so you're basically to get woo woo, you're aligning yourself with kind of the laws of nature of like studying geometric growth and like copying that and putting it in your marketing campaigns. And so you see geometric growth in like memes, you see it in forest fires, virology, things of that. If you can, like, ironically, if you study some of these things, you can also then bake it into a campaign. And word
that's
of mouth is
interesting.
one of
Mm,
those. Word of mouth is one of those things that you can study. Um, and like an idea is this idea of like behavioral residue as an example. Like a lot of products and services are invisible, but if you can attach a behavior to it, and then this is where the bacteria idea comes in, is like bacteria spreads. So like how can you put bacteria on your product and get that to spread? And a
mm,
really cool example of that would be the Nike campaign with Lance Armstrong. Um, Famously, apparently at the time, they were discussing whether Lance should cycle across America or they do like little yellow bands that said like live strong. For whatever reason, they opted for the little yellow bands to support the cause. And what happened is they bought 100,000 units, and by the first year, let's just say they sold 1 million of these things. And the reason it was so effective was because of this idea of like um, uh, virality, word of mouth, and behavioral residue. A problem with people donating to charities is no one really can see it. but these bright yellow bands sitting on people's wrists was a talking point. People hadn't really seen it at
Mm.
that point, and it was like, "What's this?" And it's like, "Oh, this is the Livestrong campaign. I'm supporting Lance Armstrong with his race on cancer." Um, and it took off like a storm. And so,
Mm.
how can you bake stuff like that into your products and services? Can often lead to some interesting results. And yeah, that's a TLDR on virology. So
It's interesting though. There's like there must be so many powerful ways to implement this. I don't think many business owners are thinking about because they're so tactical, with good reason
yeah,
too. I think majority of our marketplace will have a strategy or tactic that they're proficient in, and it's, I mean, obviously self-serving to sell that because that's all that they can do, right? Let's say like you got an ads expert that runs Facebook ads. I would expect him to sell Facebook ads as the number one way to grow whatever business that he's helping. But when you're
yeah,
coming in and you're not coming in as a specific, like a specialist in any particular field, then it's like, let's look at this business. You say you want to do it 2x, like is a new ad campaign going to really be the 2x or 3x or 10x, or is it maybe a combination of these three other things, right? So like, how do you, well, I actually have so many questions now because
yeah,
you're just very knowledgeable, man. Like, a lot of this stuff. I find myself sitting here thinking, I'm quite busy as a marketer and as a copywriter and a business owner. Like, I'm busy. And where do you find the time? You're working till 2 a.m. on campaigns. Where do you find the time to go into all these, cross-industry concepts and bring them into the work that you're doing? Like, how do you keep leveling up like this?
good question. How do I do that? I guess it's just an obsession of mine. I
Mm.
read widely. So one of the early mentors I had talks about this idea of having a well-furnished mind. And so like I'm sat in my library right now and there's floor to shelves of books. I will read or I will pay attention to to the conversations that people are having. And then also just like the dead time. A lot of people have dead time. Let's say you're waiting for a train or you're waiting for an Uber. Like, can you read in that period of time? Or when you're driving, instead of listening to Ed Sheeran, how can you listen to an audiobook? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
as that stuff adds up over time. Like small habits stack, and so there's this idea that comes from programming, which is called GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out. I think a large thing is just I'm very conscious of what I'm feeding my mind, and I'm very focused on putting proper inputs into my mind so that I get better outputs. And I remember there was a period of time, like for the record, I do watch movies occasionally, but there was a period of time where I just decided to not watch any movies or TV series and just read instead. Um, and then also just talking to people. Like there's if you pay attention, there's a lot of conversations that you were probably already having that you may have never considered the ramifications of it if you weren't listening properly. I just helped with a proposal for a $1 billion company, and we'd met the day before with the founder, and there was one line he said in the conversation that I latched onto, and that became a reframe for the entire pitch. And it was one sentence in like a 2 hour long conversation. So also another area is just paying attention to stuff. Um, hopefully that's valuable. But like the other thing is you're already having meetings and talking to people. Like people talk about stuff that's happening in the industry all the time that if you're paying attention to, you can just kind of like store in your brain for some other point. Um, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's I guess that's kind of how I've done it. I will say a joke at acquisition for some of the guys was like I was a walking dictionary or encyclopedia. And I like
At
when I
acquisition.com.
yeah, so when I rocked up, I spent 6 months out there before the workshops pending like the visa, and I turned up with two suitcases. One suitcase had clothes, and the other suitcase had all my direct marketing and marketing books. It was actually a problem when I was leaving because I was going down to South America, and I basically had to leave like some of my treasured possessions, which were my books, by by the customs because like they wanted a stupid amount of money to like to pay for that thing, and I could just buy the books again for like less, and I was just like, I'm not lugging those around. So I genuinely left like a library just sitting on the counter. I
Oh,
hope,
that's too bad.
yeah, I hope someone like saw it and just like picked up one of these books and it's like changed their life because um, yeah, like if you read the right stuff, one idea can pay for the entire book like tenfold. Um,
Yeah.
so so yeah,
That's
that's
why you're a big believer in publishing as well, selling books. It's because
yeah,
it's significant for you too.
I would say so, and also
Mm.
podcasts. So I actually think podcasts is like a last frontier of really good information on the internet, like where you've got experts like yourself, um, like who are busy doing business. If you've got someone who's been able to like sit down for an hour or 2 hours and just like talk about some of the stuff that they've done in their career, that's like super high value, like value per minute on how someone has achieved a certain thing. And so
Right.
I'm increasingly like bullish on podcasts as a method of skill acquisition and actually finding the true experts that are like behind the scenes growing something.
Yeah, that's a good point because you can't talk about something for 2 hours unless you have some level of, you know, intimate understanding of the topic. You're just going to run out of stuff within 2, 3 minutes, right? So,
As I say.
yeah. Hey, that's really good. Okay, so if I were to go and improve at marketing and I want to go and let's say choose some books that I can start with. I mean, there are some of the, you can Google, top 5 books on marketing, but how do you go about, let's say you've covered the basics, and I know a lot of people watching this have read a few core books on marketing and copywriting. Once you feel like you have a decent understanding of the fundamentals, you can always revisit those books, but then how do you branch out to where you're starting to find those not fresh, but those relevant things that still apply to the market, but just not like the mainstream material?
Yeah. The first one is taking books out of the equation for a second is go out into the market and get punched in the face.
Mm,
So there is a point where you can do all the reading in the world and it doesn't make a difference. Um, you need to go out into environments and like test with money on the line. Um, and that would be kind of like just go out and get the reps, get the experience, and learn by doing. Like a huge part related to the more esoteric marketing knowledge. I'm a huge fan of like old books, so old dusty books that were written in 1950s, 1920s, or even previously. Um, and even to a degree, studying the case studies of um, companies that have been successful. So I mentioned the Viagra and Cialis. Like studying Viagra or studying Lovable or studying Facebook and how they grew by scaling communities. Like there's always like these learning lessons that you can get from like the case studies of the big businesses, basically. And another place I like studying is actually can't quite call it studying, but let's say funnel hacking. Is you can read the investor reports for publicly listed companies, and so previously it was actually quite difficult to find these. You'd have to go to a company's website, potentially find the parent company, and then try and find the investor report in like the investor relations in the footer. You can actually get ChatGPT to pull this for you. It saves
oh, that's
like
cool.
half an hour to do so. But why is this important? Well, publicly listed companies, they're fairly large, but because they're publicly listed, they have to actually like be very open with how they're growing and what they're doing and all of their product lines. And so you can actually learn quite a lot about how a big business operates by reading these investor reports. And I'll give you an example. During the workshop division last year, we scaled a workshop division. We brought in 3,100 businesses in the first 12 months. And that was why I was spending 5 to 6 months out there, is I was helping out with the workshops. So one of the businesses that I was tasked with helping scale was a golf business. And it was like a little putt-putt based out in like California. Amazing founder, like really scrappy, really cool business. It was like, how do you grow a putt-putt business? And so what I did is I found a publicly listed company that had a putt-putt division in the business, and I basically played spot the difference. What made this putt-putt business
Ah, so smart.
effective
Yeah.
compared to
Mm,
this one? And like it wasn't just marketing. it was actually on the product level. So this small putt-putt didn't sell alcohol. And for this publicly listed company, wet sales or alcohol sales represented 50% of their revenue. And so, like, on the marketing side, sometimes it's the economics or the underlying economics of a company that helps make it successful so that you're able to have budget to market the thing in the first place. What started as a challenge on how to grow a putt-putt with low margins also became an exercise in what is the business missing that can give it better margins so that we can spend more money on advertising. And so we talked through how to essentially, like, why this person should start selling like drinks. Doesn't have to be alcoholic, for the record. You can do non-alcoholic cocktails and still get margin from that. So we talked about like increasing the unit economics, but we also talked about viral marketing because it's cheaper. So where he couldn't necessarily pay money for like advertising or like traditional advertising, we talked about other forms of advertising that were a lot cheaper to get, that fit his model with a better channel on distribution. And so yeah, that's kind of what that looked like.
That's interesting. Yeah, I love that. It's just like so coming so left field. It's like such a different way to approach it, and I think it makes so much sense now that I think about it. Like looking at spot the difference between a company that's in a similar niche versus just copying. I think it's a different frame of a different way to get the outcome, you know, because a lot of funnel hacking, a lot of marketing, copying businesses online is sort of like, like out of context, because you could take a funnel and say, this funnel's performing well, let's copy this funnel. But if you don't understand their back end, you don't understand, you don't have access to the P&L, you don't actually understand their advertising strategy, you don't understand like how much word of mouth they have, you know, it doesn't work the same way. You know, for example, I mean, we could just even use my own like education business, my coaching for copywriters, right? The funnel is not really a primary driver of revenue, because most of the business is referral based. Most of it's based on other copywriters talking to other copywriters. So people could look at my funnel and be like, that's how he built this business. It's like, well, if you knew what actually was involved in the back end, majority of the work I do in my business, you don't really see it online, because the type of qualified leads that I want to generate, they're not necessarily coming from some, you know, like general ad to VSL to book a call funnel, which is how many people do a high ticket coaching business. Most of mine is, you know, just general conversations with quality people that just kind of like bounce around each other until they find me, you know, that, and it actually turns out to be a much more affordable acquisition channel than spending $2,000 to acquire a high ticket customer, right? Like it just works for me. Maybe not at the scale of, let's say, $10-20 million a year. So if we went there, you know, we'd have to talk to you about secrets or distribution. But you know, that's sort of like the thing is like, you know, people can look at it and just look at that. They just isolate this one thing and they're not looking at the full picture. And this is why I think this is really an opportunity for our industry, is being able to have somebody to come in and actually look at the whole business and see every part of it, and not just have like one very, very specific skill that this is all they can see, right? I want to bring us back to distribution for a little bit, because I feel like there's some stuff that we could still continue on there. Like you talk about that domino, the concept of how it's like 1.5 to knock the next domino down. Like how do you engineer and take those principles and apply it into a business? We did briefly talk about it, but like, would you say like with an internet marketing business or business that sells like digital products, how do you kind of bake that kind of stuff into their offer, or how does that work?
Yeah. So talking about conversions and then attention or distribution, it's pulling both of those levers at the same time. Related to one of the things you mentioned, which stuck with me, is for a lot of online businesses, they're not very good at selling because they don't really have like an asset people would want to buy. But what is the asset in these businesses? It's the funnel. And so related to the domino strategy, when it comes to scaling, let's say, one of these online businesses, I'd be looking at a domino strategy specific to the marketing funnel, because that's the asset in the company. And so something I like doing is kind of like a back to front approach, where you start with the CRM. So the CRM is the emails, what are the automations within the company, and then what are the campaigns. And that can become a core, when it comes to purchases. Like, what do you do to the purchases to help them ascend into to higher priced items, and then also leave reviews and build word of mouth? Like, that's that. What do you do about the welcome sequence to convert more customers that come from your website and maybe come in from a pop-up or a lead form? How do you then convert more of those guys? So I'll start with a CRM. And again, depending on the scale of the business, for a new enterprise, it's all about distribution and getting to like product market fit. But let's say for an already established business, I would typically often start with a CRM and help improve revenue from a CRM basis to get to kind of a KPI. So for me, I think most businesses can get 20 to 30% of their revenue or more from email marketing. And so if there is a gap there, I will focus on that. And the reason I do that, I know 30% revenue doesn't necessarily sound that compelling, but it's also very low cost. And so a lot of people don't appreciate the numbers behind increasing revenue via email, because quite often it's some of the most efficient sales a business can get. And on the margin perspective, it actually has like an order of magnitude difference on profit. That profit is then stuff that you can take into marketing to buy more attention. So for me, often the first domino is actually email and driving far more profit from email. I then take that into the landing pages or the funnels. And so once you've got like more profit coming in the business, I'll reinvest into like, let's say, branding on the website or the landing pages to make them convert better. You then have more people coming into this ecosystem that you've already built, and it starts spinning off more cash. You've then got landing pages that convert well, and you've also got an email ecosystem that is like dialed in. You've got spare cash. You can then take that into advertising, and there's this idea of like whoever can spend the most money to acquire a customer wins. You have more money than potentially a likewise business in a similar space because your email is dialed. You can buy more attention on something like Meta.
Yeah,
that's a pretty linear process to do that. On distribution, just as a side subject, I would say the fortunes that are made in advertising have been made because of an arbitrage in attention, i.e., you put $1 in, and instead of getting $3 out, you're getting 30 or $100. These arbitrages in attention do exist, and yes, you can do Facebook ads. Yes, you can do 3x ROAS, 2x ROAS at millions in spend, and you can make a fortune doing that. Like, absolutely do these things. But for some of these scrappy entrepreneurs who want to like get like a quantum leap, as an example, is there an arbitrage in intention that they can unlock, and where does that exist? And so
fantastic.
An example,
an
example looking at history is comic book advertising. Not many people knew about the fact you could advertise in comics. It was super cheap. The first businesses that figured out about comic advertising, they were able to grow pretty large. And so there are pockets of attention online that have these arbitrages of attention that people don't know about, and you can essentially go off market, get off market rates, and you put $1 in and you get 100 out. Like one of the funnels I'm working on at the moment, we're getting a 30x on the front end, and it's
love it.
Yeah. I'm not going to comment where we're getting that, but it's
sure.
If you know it exists, it also gives you if you know it exists, you're more likely to find it. Basically, you can't necessarily hit a target you don't know about. So just knowing that there are these targets out there, you can get it with certain products or structures, I would say is quite encouraging.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I've also got a very similar process with the way I would go into a business and optimize I start with email. I mean, I've been calling it the list these days because it usually also comprises of the SMS and WhatsApp business groups as well sometimes, right? So that asset for the business, that list of qualified leads, you've spent millions of dollars to acquire those customers, or not, maybe they're not buyers yet, but you've spent millions of dollars to get that list. That's an asset. I see it like the same way as you would manage a fund of $100 million. You need to look after that $100 million. It's like you have 5 million contacts in HubSpot. That's a freaking gold mine. And if you don't treat it properly, it's like, sure, it's 20 to 30%. That's fine. But not treating it correctly, it breaks everything else, because every customer that joins or buys the product, you can trace that their email was at some point part of the email list, even if the attribution doesn't come from email, even if the attribution comes from a Facebook ad. When they purchase, they're now part of that contact list, right? So it's like seeing that contact list as that's your qualified audience, building that qualified audience at the most cost effective rate is what I'm seeing is, at least for the info guys and D2C ecom, that's like really the play right now. Because, if your whole business is just dependent on, like, let's just say $1 in, $3 out on Facebook, and then one thing changes in the funnel, or like Facebook changes the algorithm a little bit, and like that's your entire business economics, suddenly you suddenly don't have such a the operation doesn't work the same way. It's like, yeah, it's working right now. We're running this webinar. We're getting people in. But every single month we get people in, we're rolling 50% of that revenue straight back into the next webinar. And it's like, there's this snowball, and it's like, if it stops working, now suddenly that whole thing ends. And that's why I see so many of these business coaches or infopreneurs, they have these 2-3 years of just hustle. And then things change. And then everything that they built is kind of like going down, because they didn't optimize that email list on the back end. They didn't optimize that real asset that they were building, because all that money that you're spending, you're getting all those people onto the email list. And, so yeah, so I like to focus on that, on the list side of things. And then, yeah, like we were talking about, previously before this call, we're talking about that funnel being that asset for the business, especially with info. And because info is like not really easy to sell, but the actual funnel is the asset. And you need to be constantly optimizing that asset, because every single dollar is coming through that conversion. It's like we were talking about, like you just said, conversion. And then distribution. Yeah, I really think that's a great way to put it, is looking for that arbitrage, looking for that opportunity to get that growth. And every single person I can think of, I mean, we could even look at Tate for an example, right? I mean, Tate's found a way to use like legacy media and the press to create infinite publicity for himself with almost $0 of spend. He's not spending any money to get all those articles written about him. So there's an arbitrage right there, right?
Exactly.
I also know that there's plenty of affiliate marketers that do the same thing, where they have all these, these lists that they're swapping with each other. You've got one guy that's got 1 million leads, another guy's got 1 million leads. It's like, well, instead of spending, $2 million on ads, let's just do a list swap. And the guys that are no longer interested in my offer go to yours, and the guys no longer interested in your offer come to mine, and boom, like no, distribution, right? So what's it look like as a marketer when you're leading teams? Because I know you're a marketing director, and like you run the whole operation, and there's like the balance, right? There's actually probably a few questions I have here, but it's like there's a balance between driving the actual team, leading the team, having conversations with the team to do the ops of the business, and then there's actually the building of the campaigns that are going to be the explosive growth, and trying to balance that. What does that look like in a business? Like, how do you balance those two priorities of, we got to keep what's working, but we also need to try and create as much resources from our creative team, or all the marketers in the team. We have to try and get some of that bandwidth, or hire contractors, whatever, to like also go and do that big campaign that's going to do the real growth for us.
Yeah. So on the team side, it's honestly, it's less about me and it's more about the team. So it's working and building a really talented like squad. Just for the record, I'm not a huge fan of managing like eight to nine plus people below me. I'm more kind of like a lean marketer. So I quite like a squad where it's just me and like 3 or 4 people, and we are like trying to like scale something really aggressively. So and this is one of the reasons why I actually prefer being a director of marketing than a CMO, because there's just a different kind of level of like, I quite like being tactical and actually like growing the thing, as opposed to on the CMO level, like you're in meetings nearly all the time, and like you have a larger team, and like I didn't enjoy it, candidly. So I actually decided to.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it. I've done that too. It's awful. Sit in meetings all day, and it's like, right, when are we going to get some work done, guys? We're just talking about what we're going to do.
Yeah, and so on the ops side, it's really having some really talented operators, like the whole team being operators in their various functions. Like someone who's really good at ads, someone who's really good at like
Mm.
automations or building out the funnels, maybe someone who's really good at design, video editing. Um, and I basically sit on top of that, and it's player coach. So it's having the ability to get stuck in with these guys, but at the same time also like going above the noise or the chaos, and also like kind of seeing where we're heading or like where the direction is. Um, and it's really challenging as well because you're also sometimes living in quote unquote fear, because if someone's in the weeds doing the thing, they are building a deeper skill set than you are. Like period. I actually don't care who you are. Like if someone is spending 8 hours a day building landing pages, they can build better landing pages than you. Like period.
Yeah.
So it's playing that kind of balance. In terms of like the organization side, it's just organized effort. So I'm a huge fan of like a 3 meeting cadence throughout a week. On Monday, we'll have a typical marketing meeting, which is like an overview of like marketing, sales, where we're at, where we're going. I like Tuesdays or Wednesdays, like let's say it's a Tuesday tactical. That's where it's like a more tactical meeting where I'm with the media buyers, or a media buyer is, just for context, someone who buys the ad placements on a platform. And then we will be looking at the campaigns and what is working, what isn't, on a very tactical level. What are the ads that are performing? What are the click through rates in the ad attribution software or on the platform? Like, what does that look like on a tactical level? And from there, we'll come up with new tests to try. And then the third meeting I like, which is not always weekly, maybe it's bi-weekly or monthly, depending on the business, is kind of these creative sprints where we are
Mm.
doing ad scripts, where we're doing the filming sessions, where we are getting the new creative to then put it into the system. And so for me, that's a kind of backbone of how I like to set up a marketing rhythm is big picture overview, more tactical stuff, a time for the scripts. I always think there's importance in like the script side, and then just more like rapid communication in Slack or WhatsApp, where around that where we're like talking about like things that we're building or how we're doing something. And it's pretty informal. Like in these WhatsApp chats or in these Slack channels, we're firing memes at each other. We're having fun as we're like growing a thing, and because it's a lean team, like you're also like you're friends with them. You're friends with the people that you work with, and it's just a really fun
Mm.
environment. So like you can be having outlier returns in a business of like creating funnels that bring in lots of people, and you can have fun doing it. Like as an example, I'm going to an event on Friday with my marketing team. We're going to have an Airbnb. We're currently dialing in an event based model for a business. So we're going to be at the event during the day, nailing kind of the scripts and the sales process and all of these things. And then afterwards, we'll have a debrief, and we'll probably work into the night on like marketing campaigns, and we'll just have fun doing it. And then yeah, that's basically it. And like we've got that on Friday, and then on Wednesday next week, we're then going up to Birmingham, and we're doing it again. And 2 weeks ago, we did it at another event. Like we're
Mm.
like it's just quite fun. And then while you're in an informal environment, you also learn all about your team and like who they are and what they're doing. Like for instance, there's a member of my team who's got a marketing agency in addition to working at the business. Ordinarily, I wouldn't be a huge fan of that, but I know that his motivation is skill acquisition. And so he's actually set up a marketing agency. He's got 15 clients. It's not making that much money because all the money is being reinvested into it, because it's not about money for him. It's about skills. And so I want that. Like the dude is so talented. Like honestly, I'm impressed. The other thing I know is he's currently got 5,000 a month in designers on his payroll. And so that's essentially, in addition, the skill he's also bringing in addition to himself, to this project that we're doing. And so the landing pages that he's got the ability to create right now, has got 50 grand a year in design talent behind him, that he's bringing
Yeah,
to the
it's pretty
table.
cool.
Yeah. And there's people blown away at the level of talent on the marketplace. Something that really kind of grinds my gears is business owners saying, I can't find talent. It's like either you don't know how to look, or you're just like, you're really mistreating the talent in the marketplace. Because like I routinely get business owners come up to me. It's like, do you have a media buyer for so and so? It's like, yeah, I've got literally a Rolodex of 150 pages at this point of people who can build funnels, ads. Like I actually keep an eye out on talent, and like it's the business owner's problem, like, in the sense of like they're just not good at they're not good at managing talent that they've already got in the business. They're like underpaying
Mm.
people, not treating people with respect, or like they don't understand how to get the best out of someone. Like they're blaming their Facebook media buyer when their funnel sucks or their sales team sucks. They're pointing the stick at the wrong person. Um, I get quite defensive when it comes to my marketing team. If there's really good guys on the
Yeah,
team, then
I've experienced
yeah,
this too. Mm. Yeah, there are a few business owners that they they'll spend $100,000 on masterminds and getting coaching and having some expert talk to them, and they'll buy like a luxury watch or whatever. But then they get upset if they have to pay 5K for, marketing talent. It's like, bro, like you need to really consider, where the ROI is coming from here. Like, yeah, sure, you can go to those masterminds, but if you see your business as an asset, like the funnel is an asset that literally every single dollar goes through, do you really want to pay somebody 3K or 20K? Like, I mean, I get it because I'm a marketer. That's why I say, like, I think that's why the 9-figure guys typically have a background in marketing, because they understand the value. They actually understand the value. Whereas a lot of the guys that just build the product, they think that the product is the growth, especially with info. Is like a lot of these guys that build an info product and they're not info marketers, they look at the business the same way as a software company or a company
yeah,
that's rapidly grown, and they're like, oh, it's technically a product-led business. It's like, well, in info, yes, there is a product behind it that carries the customers and carries the revenue, but it's much more promotion-based, offer-based. It's a marketing, you use marketing as your mechanism to get all those customers. The product carries on the back end, but it's not a product-led business per se, right? It's much more about your brand or whatever the distribution strategies that you have, right? So
yeah,
I would love to take this, like, speaking of talent and having connections to people, you were referred to, Alex Hormozi, Leila Hormozi, acquisition.com by somebody that you're close with, right? And you've been introduced to a lot of different people, actually. And I talked to you about this before, and I would love to know, like, if you could tell, those watching, like, how do you go about building this network or the circle of people that are always looking out for you, but like also the right circle that are in with the right people. I mean, working with acquisition.com is not an easy, you don't just walk into the front door. Like, you have to know certain people and have a certain level of skill. How did you build that circle?
yeah. So as we kind of talked about earlier, it was caring about the results that your client got. And I know that seems so trite, but early on, like I was fairly good at sales. So I closed a decent number of clients in a short period of time, and it was actually a disaster. So, like, let's say I closed 16 people within the first like 3-4 months. Like, my results were all over the place. Like, I was doing everything from writing email sequences to landing pages to trying to run ads for people when I had no reason to be running ads. But I've just bought an SMMA course and I thought I could do it. So there were a number of clients that I had to like refund the money, and like the results were not what either of us wanted. So what I decided to do is I decided to go all in on a specific business and get good. And so through the journey of getting good, that was transformational for me because I actually started to get serious results. And like when you get results, that's when people start paying attention. Um, and so like for the first email list I was given, I generated 250,000 out of it in the first 30 days.
Nice. Yeah,
Like
it's good.
it was, yeah, it was, but like I wasn't being paid much money in order to do that. And so for the record, like there were also times where I was being wildly underpaid for the service that I was providing, but I was playing a different game. And the reason I quote unquote ascended to the level I did is there was something that I read in a books, um, which was as like I do I the phrase was like I do more than I get paid for, so I can get paid more than I do, or something like that. And so it didn't matter how much I was being paid at the time. I was aiming to be the best person within the company, as it were. And so,
Hmm.
and then you mentioned word of mouth. like it was through the process of getting good that word of mouth started like just coming towards me. And so it was kind of like this reputation that I'd built that started to speak for itself. Um, so that was a big thing. And then related to like how you get into large businesses, let's say you don't have a referral into the company. The great thing about a big business is if you put ego to the side and you just focus about getting good, there's quite often some like what I would call a beachfront into a big business that at least gets you onto their radar. And so for me, when it came to like the process of getting good, I wanted to get to the best agency I could at the time, or that I thought was the best agency. And so the entry point or the beachfront that I decided to attack this business with, if you view each business as a fortress, how are you getting into the door? At the time, they had a job description out for Facebook ad buyer. Now, I'm not a Facebook ad buyer, but I applied anyway, and I got an interview with the founders. And I pitched myself. I didn't get the job, but they reached out 3 months later because they wanted me to write ad scripts. I was being paid, let's say, like 300, 400 pounds a month to write like 50 plus ad scripts on a weekly basis. Like it was truly like churn and burn agency environment. Like
That's a lot,
but
bro. Whoa.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was doing like you asked about how I also learned as much as I did. I've just done an insane amount of reps. Like a reason I know about growing a golf business now is because I was involved in helping scale a golf business, and like the guy reached out to me a few months later, and he's like, our business has grown 30%. So, but like the like even in that 6 month period when I was physically in the workshops at acquisition, I saw somewhere in the region of 800 different businesses in person. On the ecom side, when I was writing those ad scripts and I was doing 50 ad scripts a week, that was across like a dozen plus ecom brands. And so I was seeing a lot of data. Like, yes, I wasn't being paid as much, and that's its own thing that you kind of have to come to terms with. But like, I put the ego to the side, and I just wanted to get good, and I got given that opportunity to get good, and I took advantage of that opportunity, and that ad
Yeah.
scripts then led to email marketing. That email marketing then led to like just the next thing, and acquisition was kind of like the paid ads in my eyes, like the paid ads, like cold traffic attraction, part of my like uh, apprenticeship, shall I say, that I was giving myself. I wanted to learn all of the key skills that I possibly could on marketing, and so and I learned that through the businesses I was working with, um, and yeah, each time
Hmm.
the opportunities got bigger, and so did the paychecks. And yes, it's not always relative to what you produce a business. Like if you make a business 30 million, it doesn't always feel great when you're not paid like proportionate to that. And so that's transparently something I need to work on myself. But it's a reason I've had all of this experience is because I've kind of made that trade, admittedly.
I think it always pays. I think it always pays back more and more as time goes on. You know, it's not the biggest
Yeah.
deal. The money will arrive. This is, it's true that, you should learn to sell yourself and you should optimize your positioning. And there's all these things that you do want to do to maximize the deal, I suppose you could say. But I only really look at the money aspect of it once I've gained all the, I guess you could call them intangibles, but the things that are not the financial benefits. So for example, in my early years as a copywriter, I wasn't so focused on how much I could make. I was much more focused on how quickly can I get 2 to 3, 8 and 9 figure businesses on my CV, that I could talk that I've done work for. Because I know that I could send 1,000 cold outreach messages and get 10 responses, or I could go and get these clients even if they don't pay me well. And then if I even just send 10 outreach messages, I'll probably close a client. Like the difference between the two situations. It's just way more, it's so much better to have the leverage of all those people that you've generated results for to be able to work with that later. I mean, now at the point where you are now, most opportunities, most marketing opportunities, you could say, if you want that and you resonate, you'd have a very good shot at, having that conversation with them, at least seeing if it's a fit. Whereas in the early days before you had done all that stuff, you don't have it. So I think a lot of marketers
Yeah.
or copywriters, service business, service businesses, they don't think that there's that much leverage in the work that they do, because they think, oh, I'm trading my time for money. But the way I see it is, you're not really just trading time for money. Every single result that you get for businesses is more experience and skill, which means you're faster at doing the same thing. But also every single result you get, you can use as a brag or as a trophy that makes getting the next client easier and easier. So there is a lot of actual leverage, even though it's not in the traditional sense of leverage, like having systems that other people are running in your business for you and doing the work for you. But yeah, so that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. I think it always goes back to let your work, do the selling for you. If you can get to the point where you just doing what you're the best at is what actually generates you more business, instead of having to, spend 2 weeks every single month looking for clients that you're not getting paid for that time. That's the best way to optimize for like having a lifestyle and a business, right? Because if you go and do outreach or apply to 20 gigs, you're not getting paid for that time. Whereas if you do work for a business and then you get a referral, you literally got a referral, you got paid, and then you got paid again for the work that you just did because people were impressed by it. That's a much more optimized way to run your service business. But it requires that skill, and it requires going into the trenches and really mastering the skill. How do you deal with the fact that there's so much unknown every time that you do this? Because every part of that process that you mentioned, you went from, these scripts to the email, and then, distribution, and like you kept like increasing the skill stack. Every time you did that, there was a lot of stuff that you probably didn't know at the beginning. Like, how do you handle that overwhelm and that demand from a business to generate results?
Yeah. The honest answer is I had no idea what I was doing at the time, so it just kind of came with time. I wish I could say like, oh, I knew the next step I was going to take before I took it, but a lot of it was also blind luck. And so I do think there is an element of luck in this equation, in addition to the work. Like, there is that saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. There's an element of truth to that. I do think it does lead people down a slippery slope of just work until like hustle culture side of things. But on the luck side, there is also just an awareness of like, when you've struck gold with something, like grabbing onto it in a bear hug and then just like holding on for dear life for as long and hard as you can to see how large it is. I've seen that with a number of businesses. Sometimes it's not actually that the founder is a genius or anything like that. They've struck a gold vein, and they're just smart enough to bear hug it to an insane level. And that's been the case for more business owners, that they won't admit it, but it's kind of quote unquote dirty secret, is like, in some instances there is an element of just luck, of like, you found a business that is a rocket ship, or you become the rocket ship, and just hold on for dear life and do your best with everything that's being thrown at you. Like, genuinely, like, I was having dinner with my granddad the other day, and some old man was listening to our conversation from across the restaurant, and he came over, and he used to be a record producer, and he said the exact same thing. Like, in addition to all of the business advice that he was trying to give, like, the most interesting thing he said was actually how he made it in the record industry. And the reality was, he hit luck with jingles, and then he just held on to that and rode it for as long and hard as possible. And now he still gets paid royalties on the jingles that his business dad did, and then his business sold. There was no genius behind that. There was no like, I'm going to go in and master this. He was a musician that got lucky with jingles. And so I do think that, like, when we talk about these big numbers, sometimes it is not like some masterful strategy. It is, you've hit a jingle, just keep singing the jingle and don't get distracted. Another frame of it is like, when it's raining money, get as many buckets as you can to catch it. And that's often why I've also found myself working till 2:00 in the night, because it's like, I know that it's raining money, and like, this is an opportunity for the business to like really make a difference.
Reflecting on my start to my career, I wouldn't say that, the luck that has hit me yet is the 9-figure luck, but I've definitely been able to create a very, a business I'm extremely grateful for and I love. And there was a lot of
Yeah.
luck in the early days. Like closing one of my first big clients there was an element of luck. I mean, obviously I applied for it and I, I did my best there. But I think that, like you said, when I got that gig, the reason I got it and not the other 10 people was because I just worked 15 hours a day that week, every day. I didn't care how hard it would take to get that gig. Once they said to me, here's the trial project, I went harder than anybody else. So I got the luck, but being able to convert luck, I think, is that core skill that people need. Is you're going to get lucky if you show up every day. Eventually the luck is going to be on your side. I learned something from a great performance coach I used to work with 4 years ago. He
Yeah.
says there's 4 to 5 lucky days in a year, or there's like
Interesting.
these days that show up in life, and you need to have the readiness, and you need to have the ability to show up every day, because those 4 to 5 days are going to show up somewhere. Sometimes they're negative days, they're bad days that like throw you off, and there's those days that are going to take you the right way. And if you're not able to show up for those days, that's when you miss the parabolic growth, right? So I got that gig and I held on to it for dear life, and I didn't let anything distract me, and I didn't literally do anything. I didn't even make myself dinner sometimes because I was so focused on that gig. Like the rest of my life kind of was on pause for those first few months because I was not going to lose it, because I knew I didn't have the skills. I knew I didn't have the experience of the other writers, but I was willing to really push myself, and I locked that gig in. And, maybe I wouldn't have closed that gig, let's just say in an alternate timeline. Like maybe I wouldn't have been lucky and closed that. But knowing myself, I think what would have happened was over the course of that year, somewhere else, there would have been a lucky break somewhere else, like maybe it wouldn't be with that business, but this other business would have been lucky break, and I would have behaved the same way. So as much as a lot of us will say like, yeah, there's a lot of luck involved in the journey, there's this element of like, when the luck eventually would have shown up, you would have been able to grab onto it. And I think that's what people need to look at a lot more often, is you can't always predict when it's going to happen, but when it does, are you prepared to hold on to it? And a lot of freelancers, a lot of copywriters, a lot of marketers in general, they don't build their business in a way that supports that luck, because they're like, I mean, I was coaching somebody 4 years ago. He had 20 clients at $500 a month each. Okay. So he's at 10K, and he's quite happy with that, but he's working with 20 people. And I said, bro, you're not allowing for any luck to happen in your business, because you've forced, you figured out how to close a $500 client. And so you forced your way to 10K with this like limited way to do it. You just forced your way there, but now you're working at 110% capacity. There's no chance that any good luck or any deal or any random thing happens that you can actually like take advantage of, because you're burnt out, you're overworked, you're so like this. Whereas, okay, maybe you should just make 4K a month and have that extra 30% bandwidth available. Okay, you don't feel productive, you're not working for that 30%, but the bigger plan is that's the 30% where you're going to be able to capitalize on an opportunity. You see that job application, now you have the bandwidth to actually go for it. Or you follow up on that job that interview that you had, and you follow up with them because you have the bandwidth. Whereas when you're too busy, you kind of stall, you kind of push away all those opportunities, and I'll do it later, or I'm busy with this other thing.
That hits pretty hard, to be honest. Like, even with acquisition. So I was only really coming in as kind of like an interim director of marketing, because the other guy at the time was quite ill, so he was going into hospital. It was only meant to be temporary, and then I was there 2.5 years. And so, like, a reason for that is, to your point, like, I put my life on hold, but more or less for that period, like, just tunnel vision. Everything was about growing. And transparently, I do have regrets on some of it. Like, there were relationships that were seriously affected when they shouldn't have been. But there's also a reason why, like, now it's a reason a lot of kind of businesses are interested in me, is because I did that, and I made that luck for myself with just getting good results. And so, yeah, I think that's a really interesting and important thing people to consider.
I think there's a hard conversation that needs to be had with people that you care about, because this is just at this point, it's not an opinion anymore. You know, like we're both having this conversation with completely different data sets and anecdotal experience, and it's the same conclusion that luck is going to happen. You need to be in a position, you need the readiness to capitalize on that luck. But when you do, a lot of other things are going to fall aside. And many copywriters I've coached, they get that luck, but they're afraid of dropping parts of their routine that are designed for their productivity. They won't allow for certain things in their life to kind of be put on pause or sidebarred or just kind of like on the back burner, because for some reason either they think that they have to hold on to everything for the sake of productivity, or maybe with relationships they obviously don't want to drop a relationship. But this is why I'm saying, like, you know, you need to have the hard conversation, and you need to tell your partner or your friends or somebody like, hey, this thing that's happened recently is completely life-changing for me if I get this right. And you know how much you mean to me, and I really care, and I'm going to be like out of this, but I have to lock in right now and I have to make this happen. And it's going to like set that expectation up front, because I think that there's a lot of people, a lot of relationships, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You know, I found in my life, I've often said that, like even with my team, even recently with my team, like I saw an opportunity and I went all in on that opportunity. And when I was doing that, I wasn't as available to give some of my team what they needed. And I told them, I said, hey, listen, for this month, I'm going to be more focused on this specific priority. And that means that I might not be able to give you everything that you need in the marketing team to do what you need to do. And I hope that you can figure out with resourcefulness how you can keep things going there while I'm focusing on this other thing, you know? And it's worthwhile. So I think that conversation is underrated, and it's not that conversation is not had with most marketers and most coaches. They won't tell you that that's what you need to do. But at the end of the day, it's the stuff in your personal life that brings you out of the focus that you need sometimes in the business environment. It is having that conversation, putting pause on certain things, or reducing the amount of time invested into other parts of your life temporarily so that you can get that one win. Because after that, life gets so much better. I mean, I look at my life today, I was working 15 hours a day, Tobias, and it's like now I can work 15 hours a day. I do sometimes, but I also could work 3 hours a day and have a team that supports me to get a lot of stuff done that I don't have to do anymore. And I have way more availability. So actually for the people that matter, I actually could show up technically twice as much time for them and still grow faster, because I made those sacrifices. I would call them investments, but you know, I made those investments earlier on in my career.
Yeah. I've been advising a number of businesses recently, and this is more informal calls, but a number of them are like startups pre-revenue, and then some of them I've been telling them about resetting their expectation on the work that is required. And I tell them the story about a plane taking off, basically. So it's like, imagine you're a plane on the runway. Like it requires a little bit more force in the beginning to like get liftoff, but then once you're at altitude, there is an element of coasting that you can do. And so, particularly for like early stage entrepreneurs, I really do think having a conversation about resetting expectations on what is required to get a level of altitude is particularly valuable. Because people often think they are better than they are, and or they just underestimate what is required to get a successful outcome. And a lot of entrepreneurs do have a story of like, we only sent 100 emails out and got one response. Cold email doesn't work. Versus the guy is like, you know what? I sent 10,000 emails out and I just did it until it worked for me. Like, very different. Same activity, different level of mindset and intensity applied to it, different outcomes. Like, yeah. So, and that's all the reason why I like studying larger businesses as well. Like, Facebook ads don't work for my industry. Well, is there a company running Facebook ads successfully? What revenues do they do? Or I like breaking those beliefs. And if there are beliefs like that, how do you beat them?
Man, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed this. Really appreciate you coming online and chatting with me about this. If somebody wants to learn your secrets and follow you and just see what you're up to, where can they find you?
LinkedIn would be the best place to reach out to me. Yeah, it would just be LinkedIn.
Cool. So I'll put the link to your LinkedIn in the description of this video. Tobias, really appreciate it, man. This was really fun. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate it, Matthew. Let's yeah, I hope it's valuable to someone.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I found a lot of insights. I think that there's so much more to marketing than, than what meets the eye at face value. It's not just about writing a couple of pieces of creative copy with AI. I think there is so much to this, and you can get lost in this industry in a good way. You can get lost in the fun of it all and figure out stuff for ages. And it's just great. Yeah, it's such a journey. So yeah, thanks again, and chat with you soon, bro.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, take care.